but this is still a pretty good image. This is the before for Ust-Luga, and then this is the after as of day 2 of the fire. You can see how much damage has occurred to the storage tanks, and I can't imagine any ships will be filling up in the next couple days. Here's the tracker for the ships in the ports of Ust-Luga. They're currently idling out, and these Russian ships don't know what to do. Let's think about what Ukraine has achieved mostly the last 6 months, and this is Russia's oil export infrastructure. They've got various ports and they got various pipelines.
We got babies coming. We got
At
his
the
last
moment,
baby.
the Druzhba pipeline is offline. Russia accidentally bombed that. Ukraine has already contested the port city of Novorossiysk. Barely any ships are getting in and out of Novorossiysk now in the Black Sea. And now we've got the Baltic Sea. Primorsk and Ust-Luga, both of these terminals have taken extensive damage. So yes, Russia still has a couple other pipelines. They've still got an oil export terminal in Vladivostok. And I know they've got at least one more oil export terminal in the Arctic, but Russia's in bad shape. This is according to Reuters. 40% of Russia's oil exports are currently offline, mostly due to Ukrainian drone strikes, the worst disruption in Russian history. Russia earns roughly a quarter of its state budget from oil and gas. This week's attacks have halted oil loadings at both of Russia's Baltic Sea terminals. So let's think about this, and here's Sir William Browder again. This is interesting. Russia has more than doubled theoretical oil revenues from the higher oil price and sanctions being lifted by the United States, but now 40% of that is offline because of Ukrainian attacks on oil export infrastructure. So in the end, Putin is not that much better off. So if the profits that Russia is getting has a little bit more than doubled, if oil is at $100 per barrel, but their oil export capacity has been reduced by 40%, almost half, Russia's still not in good shape. They're getting a higher price for their oil, yes, but Ukraine is being incredibly effective at disrupting their ability to export and make money. Russia's Baltic coast took 3 hits in one night: gas hub, oil terminal, and a military icebreaker. I want to quick mention this ship. This is Project 23550. This is a Russian patrol ship, and it looks like Ukraine struck this with a drone, and currently it's on its side in the water. So this is the before, and this is the after, and I don't think that ship's going to be fixed anytime soon. Sanctioned Russian Shadow Fleet tanker struck by drone near Istanbul. 140,000 tons of oil were on board. This is the Shadow Fleet tanker, the Altura, and it's reported that it was attacked by a drone. The deck, bridge, and engine room were all damaged. Ukraine has been disabling Shadow Fleet tankers in the Black Sea, but they've been sailing naval drones into the back of the ship to disable the rudder. The destruction here sounds like this was an aerial drone. So perhaps Ukraine did use an aerial drone to strike the top of the ship in order to deter these ships from sailing into the Black Sea to try and fill up at the port city of Novorossiysk. So maybe Ukraine wasn't responsible for this, or maybe this is a new tactic. The Great Crackdown. Russia tightens the screws on the internet. This is fascinating for me. Like, next week, guys, is going to be incredibly interesting. So definitely tune into the videos, because Russia is going to go dark. Telegram is going to be officially blocked. 90 million Russians are going to lose their main form of social interaction and connection. And the normies are already starting to figure it out. Mobile internet in Moscow has been out for 3 weeks, and mobile internet in St. Petersburg has now been out for a week. And the normies in Russia are starting to pick it up. So this is a woman who I'm assuming is some kind of fashion or cosmetic blogger, and she posted a video complaining about all the internet restrictions happening in St. Petersburg. Bring back the effing internet to St. Petersburg. Those from St. Petersburg will get what I mean. And for those who aren't, here's the scoop. For 2 days now, the internet has not been working at all. Not in the city center, not in the Leningrad region, nowhere. Only apps from the whitelist are working, and this whitelist isn't working a damn bit either. I can't open a bank app. I can't open Telegram, which is the most important thing. I can't transfer money. I can do absolutely nothing. Welcome to North Russia. Honestly, it feels like I'm in the 2000s. Even the connection is lagging. I'm talking to someone on the phone, and they're like, I check all the news channels, and there's only one story everywhere. There are already 14,000 complaints. We were told to contact the censorship agency in Russia. Great. Yesterday, I tried to pick up a package from Wildberries with the products for review and so on. I can't get them. They told me, we can't give it to you. There isn't internet working here. Wi Fi at home only works intermittently. Telegram only loads with a VPN, and that's at home. It doesn't work at all outside. You know the only place where it works? In the metro. This isn't a drone threat. It was lifted yesterday morning, saying everything's fine and there are no drones. It's all for your safety. Switch to Max and VK. Screw you and your Max and VK. Let people work. My entire job depends on the internet. Why is everything here in Russia's second northern capital after Moscow like the Middle Ages? I can't even get online in the effing city center. We're going to find out how she thinks and feels, or maybe we won't, because the Russians won't have internet, they won't have social media, and she'll no longer be able to post her beauty vlogs to make money. Putin watched Khomeini get killed, then disappeared from public view for 9 days, then shut down Moscow's internet. Moscow's internet went dark after Khomeini was assassinated by the United States. This isn't a coincidence that the internet in Moscow was knocked out precisely when the United States attacked Iran 3 weeks ago. So I think this has had a psychological
I'm gathering up all the water.
Putin is
That's the whole point of the game. You
about
gotta
being
sequester it so it
assassinated,
won't get lost.
given what happened to Gaddafi, what happened to Bashar, what happened to Maduro, what happened to the Ayatollah Khomeini. Putin is developing a pattern. The United States is not predictable. The United States is not reliable. And at any point, Donald Trump could have a change in feeling and decide he now wants to kill Vladimir Putin. I'm not holding out for that scenario, but it is a possibility. So Peskov was asked about Khomeini's assassination. This is Putin's spokesperson. And this is what he said. They are killing Iran's leaders one after another and are quite openly celebrating it. What kind of reality is this, where it's now considered normal to kill a new leader of another country every day and seemingly take pleasure in it? Well, this really is the reality we live in. Let's hope it's something abnormal. In any case, this is abnormally that has had and will continue to have very deep consequences. This won't go without consequences. We see that Iran is defending itself, and it's doing so quite actively. We can see that, unfortunately, the war has a tendency to spread beyond its own boundaries. We know that at the start of this campaign, this act of aggression, the aim was ultimately to bring about regime change in Tehran. At this point, one thing is clear: every such action only strengthens the unity of the Iranian people around this leadership. Therefore, I don't think any clear-headed person would attempt to predict how events will unfold. Well, the fact that nothing good is happening is indisputable. This is according to the Financial Times. More evidence of Russia helping Iran with drones revealed. Russia has been shipping drones to Iran to aid its ally in the war against the United States and Israel, according to Western intelligence, reported by the Financial Times. Vladimir Putin and the Russians are shipping kamikaze drones to the Iranians to use against Israel, and American forces. And Donald Trump doesn't care. He still wants to partner with and do business with the Russians. And I mean, the world has gone insane, guys, but the good news is every drone that Russia sends to Iran, that's not a drone that can be used against Ukraine. Like, I'm grasping here. But Russia launched their largest ever air attack Ukraine the other day. This was over a 24-hour period. So my update video from 2 days ago, we covered the first half of the attack, but then Russia launched another 400 or 500 drones. 999 Shahed drones were launched against Ukraine in a 24-hour period. Something tells me that Russia intended to do 1,000 and one of them didn't get off the ground. But Ukraine had a 94% success rate of intercepting them. Ukraine's air defense downs 97% of Russia's kamikaze drones in a rare mass daytime strike. So this was initially 400 drones plus ballistic missiles plus cruise missiles. And then, like, less than 24 hours later, an additional 505 or 556 Shahed drones went into Ukrainian airspace. The Russians are experimenting. They were trying to see if they could catch Ukraine's drone interceptor crews off guard, or maybe their drone interceptors would be depleted. But no, Ukraine still had effectiveness, downing 97% of these drones. But that means 3% still got through. We did initially see these pictures coming out of Lviv. Russia struck the historic downtown. These are UNESCO protected buildings. And this is a church. This is the 1630 Bernardine Church and Monastery in Lviv. And Russia deliberately targeted this because it's terrorism. While Ukraine is going after port infrastructure, this is to deplete the Russian military budget. The Russians are just blowing up landmarks and churches because they're terrorists. Let me share with you the names and faces of two of the victims. Russia killed a Ukrainian defender from the National Guard, Volodymyr, and his daughter, Analia. Volodymyr's wife, this is Analia's mom. She had just given birth to a baby boy. These two were visiting her in the hospital when they were killed by a Russian Shahed drone. The peace talks are back, sort of. Reuters is reporting the United States is linking security guarantees to Ukraine only if they give up the rest of the Donbas region. President Zelensky has confirmed this. So I think the peace talks are done, guys. I think Donald Trump and MAGA have bigger concerns, and they basically already got what they wanted from the peace talks. What Donald Trump and MAGA wanted was to lift all sanctions on Belarus and lift all sanctions on Russia so they can do business and make money from the Russians. And because they triggered an economic crisis with their war against Iran, Trump already got what he wanted. They lifted all the sanctions on whoever they want, and they can start doing business deals and making money. So the United States, I think, is going to walk away from these peace talks. Now, Zelensky doesn't support that because he wants engagement. He doesn't want to shut the door on purchasing additional weapons from the United States. In addition, Ukraine benefits when they get POW exchanges. These have been also accomplished in the peace talks. But as far as giving up territory, that is the only reason why Russia is participating. The only reason why Russia is entertaining peace talks is not because they want peace, not because they want a ceasefire. They just want the United States to pressure Ukraine to give them more territory before they continue the war and go for even more territory. But here is the reaction how a resident of the Donbas region feels. They're talking about giving up Donbas like it's a region on a map. That's my home, the place I was born, the streets I know by heart, the people who raised me, the memories that didn't disappear just because Russia decided to invade. And now the idea is simple: trade it away for security guarantees. There is nothing secure about abandoning your home. No deal, no pressure. No politician gets to decide that my home, our home, is expendable. Donbass is not a negotiation point. It's where we come from, and we're not giving it away, period. Even if Zelensky were to give up territory, the word of Donald Trump is worthless. Security guarantees from the United States under Donald Trump or any future MAGA president, they're all worthless. These people are liars. They are deceivers. They are corrupt. And unless you're bribing them, they're not going to help you and they're not going to protect you. So the war is going to continue. I don't see any good options for Russia, but Ukraine's kicking ass on the battlefield, guys. Their drone kill zone has completely stopped Russia's spring offensive. We were talking about how slowly the Russians were advancing and how it would take another 5 or 6 years just to get the rest of the Donbass region. But based on the maps from the last 3 months, they're not moving. And I don't see their prospects getting any better. Let's quick follow up on the election happening in Hungary. That's coming up in 2 weeks. And this is the main opposition candidate. This is Peter Magyar. This is the guy trying to defeat Viktor Orban. He posted the latest poll, and this is current as of March 25th. Peter is polling at 58%, or his party, and Viktor Orban's party is polling at 35%. So that is a 23-point advantage going into the election. Now, Viktor Orban is going to cheat. He's going to lie. He's going to use every dirty trick he thinks he can to stay in power. But I just don't see how you can fake the outcome of election when it's not even close. The people of Hungary, if Viktor Orban tries to stay in power, they're going to have their own Maidan revolution. They're going to storm the Capitol building and drag Viktor Orban and his corrupt cabinet out of the halls of power. Let's now follow up on Iran. Iran has received Trump's 15-point peace plan to end the war. President says negotiations are happening right now. No, they're not. Trump is lying. Iran is not negotiating. There's no set date, location, time, or place, or people to meet to have peace talks. Trump just makes stuff up. Iran rejects Washington's 15-point peace plan and escalates attacks on Israel and the Gulf. The Americans are shocked by Iran's unrealistic demands. Tehran is demanding that before any ceasefire takes place, the United States must shut down its military bases in the Middle East, pay reparations, and stop strikes on Hezbollah, and fully lift all sanctions on Iran. Iran also wants to charge ships for passing through the Strait of Hormuz and keep its nuclear program without any restrictions. So the United States has made their maximal demands, and Iran has made their maximal demands. Maybe when this war or conflict ends in the future, there'll be somewhere in the middle. But nobody's getting absolute victory, which means the war is going to continue potentially for a long time. Here's some analysis from Danny Citronowitz. He's been pretty good on Twitter the last couple days. This is yet another piece of evidence that Washington still doesn't understand the shift Iran has gone through during the war. The regime today is more radical, less centralized, and increasingly convinced that it is winning, which means it believes it can dictate the terms of how this conflict ends. That leaves Trump with two real options: either de facto surrender, a ceasefire without a deal, or an agreement shaped around Iran's demands, or a major escalation with severe consequences for the global system and the international economy. This is the direct result of a campaign built on flawed assumptions, especially a fundamental misreading of Iran's resilience. Iran is not Venezuela. There is no Delcy Rodriguez waiting in Tehran, and there is no silver bullet for the Iran problem, period. At the moment, Donald Trump is freaked out and he's threatening war crimes. I'm going to destroy civilian power plants unless you surrender. This doesn't work because the government of Iran, they're all religious fanatics. They kill their own people. So threatening to do harm against the civilian population if you don't surrender doesn't affect them. They're okay with dying. They're okay with martyring themselves because they'll be rewarded in the next life. So Donald Trump keeps trying to threaten Iran with anything using hard power and force, and Iran doesn't care. It's already one of the most isolated and reclusive countries in the entire world. Their economy is already destroyed from 49 years of sanctions. The United States doesn't really have any good options here. To put this in comparison, how everyone in my government is an absolute moron. There was no planning, no clear objectives to initially starting this war. Let's compare it to 2003 under the Bush administration. Everyone hates the Bush administration. They were evil, but they were competent. They were planners. They had objectives. They achieved them. So we are now 26 days into Trump's war against Iran. And by this same point under Bush in 2003, US forces had destroyed the Iraqi military, taken the capital city of Baghdad, driven Saddam Hussein from power, and secured the final regime stronghold in Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. Iraq had completely fallen, and the United States was in control of the entire country. That was 23, 24 years ago. And today, we've achieved nothing. Because Iran has this one ace in the hole that can't be beaten. Iran allows non-hostile ships to transit the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran says vessels must coordinate with its authorities and not support military actions against the country to pass safely. So here is the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is still firing on ships, and only about 4, 5, or 6 ships are getting through a day. These are ships either going to Pakistan, India, China, maybe a couple others, but they also have to pay a toll. They have to give Iran $2 million for safe passage. And Iran can make the situation worse for the global economy. Iranian officials have again threatened to open up another front, this being the Bab el Mandeb Straits in the Red Sea. This is a narrow gap in which the Houthis, this is an Iranian ally, they've got weapons. They can fire on ships. They can make it so transiting the Suez Canal becomes impossible. And by controlling these two choke points, every container ship in the world now has to go around the coast of Africa, which requires a lot more cost and a lot more time. How do you make this stop? If Iran just uses cheap drones and cheap naval mines and artillery, rockets, whatever, like you can't make this stop unless you control the entire coastline. So this has been going on for over 3 weeks now, and the global economy is crashing. Vietnam Airlines plans domestic route cuts due to a jet fuel shortage. The Philippine president says grounding planes due to fuel shortage is a distinct possibility. Cambodia turns to Singapore and Malaysia for fuel as Vietnam and China are now restricting their supplies to other countries. 500 service stations in Australia in 2 of their largest states have run out of gas and diesel. This is being reported by Sky Australia. Energy shortages in Europe could hit by next month, warns Shell CEO. The situation is very bad for the entire globe. Now, energy independent states such as Russia, they can keep their supply of oil internally and they don't have to export, so there won't be any shortages in Russia. The same is true for countries like Canada and the United States. We are energy independent, we are net exporters, so we can detach our supply from the global supply. If Donald Trump wants to, he can tell American oil producers, you can't export anymore. You have to maintain your own American price of $75 a barrel. And you can't sell it to a higher bidder to Japan or South Korea or whoever. This might happen. And this would be very bad. Very bad for the people who don't have oil. Think Mad Max, guys. This is according to the New York Times. 13 U.S. military bases in the region are basically uninhabited now, forcing the dispersal of many of the roughly 40,000 troops stationed in the region. Some have been sent to Europe, others to improvised sites like hotels, effectively fighting the war remotely. The United States has abandoned their military bases in the Middle East because FPV drone strikes in Baghdad expose U.S. vulnerabilities. One, Iranian missiles and drones are getting through. They're hitting U.S. military bases and killing U.S. personnel. But this is the same situation between Ukraine and Russia. And Donald Trump, his administration did nothing to prepare for this. These are Iraqi militias backed by Iran, and they have fiber optic FPV drones. This is Camp Victory in Baghdad. So this is a U.S. military base. And this Iraqi militia released the drone video of them destroying a helicopter. They also had another drone come in and destroy this radar system, but there's no defense for this where you don't take casualties. Yes, if you want U.S. soldiers standing outside with shotguns, they might get lucky, or they might die. And there's no counter to this. There's no stopping this. It's only going to get worse. I'm sure. Russia is sending Iran fiber optic FPV drones and telling them, go after U.S. embassies, go after U.S. military bases, kill whoever you can kill. So Trump will escalate because he doesn't know what to do. U.S. sends up to 3,000 elite 82nd Airborne troops to the Middle East. Ground war concerns rise. They're going to start taking islands. There's a couple of them off Iran's coastline that Iran can use to attack ships. They all have to be secured and cleared. But then there's Karg Island, and this is where 90 to 95% of Iran's oil exports come from. The Marines, the 82nd Airborne, they can take this island. That's not the problem. It's holding it against cheap fiber optic FPV drones, against artillery, against whatever. Things are going to get bad. Trump's approval rating is finally tanking. He was holding strong at 38, 39, 40% consistently in polls. To my non-American friends, I know that's shocking, but at this point, I'll take whatever we can get. So you can see his approval rating going back a year was 47%. It's just been slowly declining, but he's lost 4 percentage points in the last 2 weeks because of Iran. And this is who's in charge of my government, all 3 branches. This is Congressman Andy Ogles, representing Tennessee's 5th Congressional District, and he's posting AI slop of himself and Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio as crusaders. And he says, Trump's war against Iran, this is a battle of good versus evil. We must affirm that our nation was built on Christian principles. Join us. These people are religious fanatics. Like the evangelical right in the United States, these people are nuts. And they will kill a lot of people and get a lot of people killed because they think they need to defend Israel. Evangelicals in the United States, a lot of them believe that they need access to the Holy Land because the rapture is coming soon, and the only way to get to heaven is if they can be in Jerusalem. These people are insane, and they're in charge of everything. So this is going to be reality kicking MAGA in the teeth. This is analysis from Goldman Sachs. Our commodity strategists now assume that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until mid-April. $160 a barrel oil is now seen as the ugliest scenario. So yes, the price of oil currently is 106. Donald Trump keeps lying and saying tweets to keep it down, but it's going to shoot up to 160. And even if there's some resolution, it's going to come back down, but stay in the 80, 90, $100 range for the rest of the year. This is a global economic catastrophe, guys. This is the input for our entire global supply chain. The price of everything is going to go up, and we're all going to get less. And I'm going to say it, but this is more bad news. This is being reported by the Washington Post. The Pentagon notified Congress on Monday that it intended to divert about $750 million in funding provided by NATO countries through the Pearl program to restock the U.S. military's own inventories, rather than send additional assistance to Ukraine. The first official said it was unclear whether European countries participating in the initiative understood how the funding was being spent. So the money that NATO partners are giving to the United States to send weapons to Ukraine, they're paying for-profit prices. Trump's going to divert that money and use it himself. He's just going to steal it. Does this mean Ukraine doesn't get the weapons that NATO purchased for them? We don't know. Ukraine struggles to find more NATO donors to pay for U.S. weapons. Only a handful of allies currently funding U.S. arms purchases. The United Kingdom is the latest to join, but Ukraine says they need about $15 billion through the Pearl program in 2026, and only 4.3 have been kicked in. But I don't think it's safe anymore. I think the Pearl program might be dead. Trump is upset that NATO partners aren't helping him by sending their warships. NATO nations have done absolutely nothing to help with the lunatic nation, now militarily decimated, of Iran. The USA needs nothing from NATO, but never forgets this very important point in time. I'm going to play a clip. I know people hate seeing him and hate listening to him, but this is going to affect everybody in Europe, Ukraine, and the United States.
But it doesn't affect us thousands of miles away. That's why when I heard the head of Germany say, this is not our war about Iran, I said, well, Ukraine's not our war. We helped, but Ukraine's not our war. I thought it was a very inappropriate statement to make, but he made it. You can't erase it. But he felt that way. I said, well, Ukraine's not our war. And it's not, but I would like to see all those young people stop being killed. When they're being killed, it's like a slaughterhouse.
My prediction, guys, is a year from now, so by March of 2027, Trump's going to be dead. I don't know how. Cancer, heart attack, stroke, J.D. Vance pushing him down some stairs. Something's going to happen, because we can't take another year of this insanity. He's not healthy. He's not well. He's not competent. And he's killing a lot of people right now. He's destroying everyone's businesses and livelihood. He is completely wrecking nations at the moment. And I wish, this delusional, insane 36% of my fellow Americans who still support him would wake up, but I don't think they will. I think those people are trapped in a cult, and they've been worshiping this man for 10 years, and they're not going to give up on, these people have sold their souls to this man. It's just really sad and shameful. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. So let's get to the good news. McDonald's to reopen in Mykolaiv after 4-year wartime closure. Operator Starsky is going to be very happy about this. But we do have some good news. The UK military is going to start boarding Russian Shadow Fleet vessels in its territorial waters. So the UK Parliament passed a new bill or law or something, and the UK is now saying they're going to join France and other countries that have started seizing Shadow Fleet tankers that are sailing.
It'll be a long drought.
I also want to give a shout out to the incredible people of Denmark. This is a graph put together by Euromaidan Press. For every dollar Denmark spends on Ukraine, France sends 7 cents and the United States sends 0. Denmark has given 3.25% of its GDP since 2022. If all NATO countries were as generous as Denmark, Ukraine would have 2 trillion instead of 350 billion. You can see which countries have been the most generous. Estonia, Lithuania, Norway, Latvia, Sweden, Finland, the Netherlands, Poland. But Denmark is number 1. Thank you so much, the fantastic Danish. Final video I have for you. This is a residential apartment building in Lviv. Russia struck it with a Shahed drone. And the residents of this building want everyone to know they will not be defeated. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.
For 25 years, the Armed Forces Vacation Club has helped military and veteran families make memories with incredibly discounted rates on resorts, hotels, cruises, and more in worldwide destinations. Sign up is completely free. See if you qualify and start saving with the most trusted name in military travel.
Welcome back, Defenders. There's a lot going on in the world. We're going to first cover the events of Russia and Ukraine. We're then going to talk about Iran and how Iran is affecting Russia and Ukraine. But first, let's follow up on the strike on the port city of Novorossiysk. This was 3 days ago, but this is still a big deal. Ukraine successfully struck 5 Russian warships, an S-300 system, a Panzer system, and 6 of the 7 oil berths at this port. This port sustained massive damage. Here's the new information. Russia's frigate Admiral Essen can no longer fire Caliber cruise missiles after Ukrainian strike. This is the ship that launched the Calibers that destroyed Mykolaiev's regional council building in 2022. Here are the satellite images showing damage to the ship. We got confirmation that the part of the ship that launches Caliber cruise missiles is no longer operable. So we can go to the bingo board. And this is the Ukrainian account that makes the bingo board for the oil refineries. He also makes it for Russia's Black Sea fleet. Russia's Black Sea fleets the last 2 or 3 years hasn't been doing pretty well. You can see here on the board, this is the flagship Moskva. This was sunk in April 14th of 2022. But here are 2 new entries. This is basically Russia's new flagship for the Black Sea fleets that took damage. This is the Admiral Essen. And then there's another ship down here, the Valentin Piklu. This is a minesweeper. Hasn't been a good war for Russia's Black Sea fleet. Russia claims Ukrainian drones attacked its gas tanker in the Mediterranean Sea. This was breaking news 2 days ago while I was filming my last video, and I assumed it was an oil tanker. Ukraine has been disabling oil tankers in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean that belong to Russia. But this is something new. This is something different. This is an LNG tanker. And let me explain what happens when an LNG tanker catches on fire. That is not a sunrise. That is not a sunset. That is Russia's LNG tanker on fire in the Mediterranean. This was off the coast of Malta. And LNG tankers are different because you can see here, there are 4 basically containers that are isolated. If one catches fire or has an accident, hopefully you don't lose all 4. And you can see this is what happens with Russia's LNG tanker. One of them exploded, caught fire, and eventually the entire ship sank, but perhaps the LNG in the other sections of the ship was still intact. Now let's actually think about this for a second. Up until this point, Ukraine has been trying to just disable the ships. They don't want to cause an oil spill in the Black Sea or the Mediterranean, and then you have oil washing up on the shores of Turkey or Italy. But
Now
for
listen to
liquefied
this.
natural gas, there is no environmental fallout such
My
as an
bad.
oil spill. Yes, this is carbon dioxide and bad for the environment, but nothing's going to be washing up on beaches like it would if it was an oil spill. So maybe this is a new tactic. Maybe Ukraine is comfortable just slamming naval drones into LNG tankers. Let them explode. The liquefied natural gas will then warm up under atmospheric temperatures and then just evaporate. There is no oil spill. And LNG tankers are more sophisticated and complicated because the LNG has to remain cooled. This LNG tanker was worth $200 million, and Ukraine just destroyed it. Who's going to stop Ukraine if they decide to go for all of Russia's LNG tankers? Now, yes, this is complicated for the buying customers, European partners and Middle Eastern partners or whoever. They're still buying Russian LNG. And if Ukraine starts sinking all of these ships, at this point, maybe Ukraine just doesn't care anymore. Ukraine also claimed a 1 billion strike on an S-400 system in Belgorod. Ukraine released the video, and this is the Lazar group, and they were able to get a relatively small drop drone above the S-400 system. They then started unloading on it with grenades, and you can see extensive damage. Ukraine is saying this is going to greatly degrade the defense system of the Russians in the Kharkiv front. More bad news. Russian helicopter reportedly shot down by friendly fire during a Ukrainian drone attack in Rostov. This is being reported by the Russians, but they accidentally shot down another one of their helicopters. This was an Mi-8, and this was confirmed by Fighter Bomber. This is a Russian military telegram channel, and he said we lost another Mi-8 and their crew. Russia's running low on skilled pilots that can handle these helicopters. And they lost another one. Russian Ka-27 helicopter destroyed over the Black Sea. I have no idea why Russia would risk a helicopter and their crew to send them out to one of these offshore drilling platforms in the Black Sea. Perhaps they wanted to put up monitoring and surveillance equipment. Ukraine spotted the helicopter at the abandoned offshore drilling platform and successfully eliminated it. I'm going to assume the crew is dead as well, but they're not recovering anything or anyone from this platform. This was yesterday, but Ukraine got another Tor air defense system. You can see this is a 3PK Tor M2, and Ukraine successfully got it. And then today, this is a different group in a different part of the occupied territories, but Ukraine got another Tor air defense system. Russia is on average losing one air defense system a day. Ukraine's 880 million drone line has turned Russian movements on the front line into a death sentence in just 12 months. Ukraine launched the drone line a year ago with 880 million in funding. The results are 1,000 drone crews across the front lines, and Russia had 30,000 soldiers killed just in this wintertime. This war is completely different. I've been making these daily update videos for over 4 years now, and it's completely changed since this point last year. Ukraine put up almost $1 billion to increase their domestic drone production, and they're aiming to produce 7 million drones this year alone. And this is just not possible for Russian ground forces to advance. This is what is happening all day, every day. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 times a day. Ukrainian drone operators are hunting in the occupied territories for Russian soldiers and obviously logistics hubs. So this Ukrainian drone operator stumbled into this building that wasn't destroyed, and they found a Russian workshop. This is a lot of E-points if you're keeping track. And the drone operator is investigating the vehicles. He's going to go for the middle van and then slam into the fuel tank. This is a follow-up Ukrainian drone to assess the damage and go after additional targets. Those 3 vans are basically torched at this point. So the second drone is going to come over here, and it's going to go for the engine of this truck. This is happening all day, every day across the front lines. thousands of times a day. Trilateral peace talks are on hold as Ukraine waits for the United States amid the Iran war. The Russians, the Americans, the Ukrainians were supposed to meet this week for additional peace talks, but things have gotten complicated since Donald Trump launched a preemptive war against Iran. Things are not going well for Iran. Iran's entire military is currently being liquidated, and the Iranians are just trying to hit anything. They're trying to kill anyone, and that's the war. Iran has no hope of winning, but they can definitely cause a lot of economic damage. They're trying to turn public opinion in the Gulf states against Israel, against the United States. They're trying to make this war unpopular among the American people, and then maybe the United States and Israel will just stop attacking them. Now, initially, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and Trump were calling this a war, but war is not popular. So instead, they're putting out the statement, this is not a war, this is a major combat operation. So Russia has a special military operation, SMO, and Trump in the United States is calling this an MCO. It's no longer a war. We're not saying that word, but it's a war. And the United States is completely destroying everything. Top priority are these trucks, these mobile launchers. These can be used for either drones or ballistic missiles. So Israel and the United States is looking for any of these tells, and they're going to destroy them. This is what they look like. You can see there's the tarp over it, but underneath they either have ballistic missile launchers or Shahed drone launchers. In addition, what remains of Iran's air force is also being destroyed. Any jets or helicopters, they're all being eliminated. Even if Iran tries to hide them, Israel and the United States are going to find them. This is a Hellfire missile going underneath the entrance of the structure to destroy a plane that was in a hardened bunker. As far as Iran's Navy, this has to be the most devastating aspect of Iran's losses so far. Any ship that has a military purpose that belongs to Iran is currently being destroyed. And this is kind of a big deal. The United States used a submarine and a torpedo to sink Iran's flagship, and this occurred off the coast of Sri Lanka, killing at least 87 at this time. So the United States declassified and released the video of the torpedo impact of this Iranian frigate. If you want to see the video for yourself, I can link it down below, but that is a massive detonation. Like this ship just lifted out of the water like it was nothing.
Don't upload your videos to YouTube. Upload to Restream, where we will live stream it to YouTube and all your platforms at once. Get ready for 5 times more engagement and views. Oh, the algorithm.
But here's the controversy. The ship was at the time invited to participate in naval exercises with India. India invited this Iranian frigate to the Indian Ocean, and it was unarmed. It didn't have any munitions on board because this was just a simulated war exercise. And the United States didn't hesitate to sink it. They also didn't rescue any of the crew members. That's maritime law. If you sink a vessel, you're supposed to pick up the survivors. So eventually, the Sri Lankan Navy went out there to start pulling men out of the water. They rescued at least 32 sailors, with more than 100 missing. I'm not showing sympathy for Iran here. I'm just questioning how honorable this is, but perhaps there is no honor in war, and given the terrorist acts and the brutality from the Iranian regime, maybe this is the only way to fight them. I'm having to internalize a lot going on here, guys, because the United States is not respecting any international laws at all anymore. Donald Trump doesn't even respect the Constitution or federal law anymore. So I'm struggling to figure out what the rules are. And as far as I can tell, there are no rules anymore.
You should set it.
The United States is hitting Iran's drone factories the way Ukraine
Open
had to hit Russia's.
Open it, open
The
it.
United States is hitting Iranian drone and missile facilities in a joint campaign with Israel.
Well, I bought it.
This needs to happen. I support this. All of the factories producing ballistic missiles and Shahed drones. At this time, the United States and Israel are annihilating them all. If you want to experience what it feels like having a Tomahawk cruise missile go over your head,
Doesn't count
this
towards
is
your
a
money.
commercial
It's my money.
container ship
I know,
crew
but I wanted to
that
sell
was
it.
able to film and spot
But it's
Tomahawk
my
cruise
money.
missiles flying over their ship.
But you need to work on your spreadsheet, baby.
You're very concerned with me. Now give me all of them.
No. They're mine.
Sure would be nice if Ukraine had some of those to go after Russia's Shahed factories. As far as the Iranians,
cards,
they're just trying to hit
This
anything
Pikachu,
and
this
kill
one, or
anyone.
this?
This is the primary oil processing facility in Bahrain, and Iran successfully struck it with Shahed drones.
Can I weigh them again?
In the first 4 days of the war,
That's
this
bad
is
luck.
what's being reported
Really?
by Israel.
Put it back.
On the first day
Oh,
of the
it's-
We're
war,
gonna open them
Iran
all, so
launched
why does it matter?
480
It's good.
ballistic missiles. On the second day, 130. The third day, 150.
Okay.
But then there was a significant drop by the fourth day of the war. Iran only launched about 40 ballistic missiles. Now they're launching thousands of drones, at least 2,000 drones, but it's the ballistic missiles that are the biggest concern. We'll talk about the issue with intercepting them. But first, let's talk about what is the United States or Trump's ultimate goal here. And I think this is pretty shocking. Will Khamenei's son succeed him
You're gonna open them anyway.
inside Iran's succession battle as the strike continues? So I think the Ayatollah's son has officially been named his successor. He's not been killed yet. He most likely will be killed because Israel and the United States do not find him as a acceptable replacement. And this is a quote from President Trump. They are wasting their time. Khamenei's son is a lightweight. I have to be involved in the appointments like with Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela. Khamenei's son is unacceptable to me. We want someone that will bring harmony and peace to Iran. Donald Trump is saying he wants to pick or have a say or a veto over who the next spiritual leader of Iran is. That's an interesting idea, but he mentions the new dictator of Venezuela. This is Maduro's vice president, and he put out this tweet today. Delcy Rodriguez, who is the president of Venezuela, is doing a great job and working with U.S. representatives very well. The oil is beginning to flow, and the professionalism and dedication between both countries is a very nice thing to see. And the new dictator of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, thanked President Trump and, quote, retweeted the White House. I thank President Trump for the kind willingness of his government to work together on an agenda that strengthens binational cooperation for the benefit of the peoples of the United States and Venezuela. This is news to me, guys. I didn't know that Delcy Rodriguez was cooperating with the Trump administration. Her boss, Maduro, was just kidnapped. Like the United States killed people when they took Maduro into custody. So yeah, it looks like Delcy Rodriguez, who was Maduro's vice president, is cooperating and agreeing to Trump's terms, i.e., sell us your oil cheap, we'll lift sanctions, we'll allow our oil majors to come into your country to help you increase production. Something we should highlight here is there's no talk of the people, no talk of human rights, no talk of releasing prisoners, no talk of democracy. Trump doesn't care what Delcy Rodriguez does in her own country. She can murder people, torture people, kill people, whatever. As long as she doesn't threaten the United States, and she agrees to sell her oil to American companies. This is what Trump was hoping for in Iran, a decapitation strike, and then Iran just chooses someone that will be pro-American. Donald Trump doesn't care what the government of Iran does to their own people. They can be as brutal and oppressive as they want. Democracy doesn't matter, human rights doesn't matter. You just can't threaten Israel. You can't threaten Saudi Arabia or the Gulf states, and you have to sell us your oil, or you have to be part of the petrodollar system and America's global hegemony in the oil trade.
This one weighs 3 pounds more. Yeah, okay. No,
This
but
is a lot to process, and for the
yeah,
average American, they were given no preparation. There was no push from the administration leading up to this invasion. So there's lots of Trump supporters, lots of Americans who are just really confused. What's the objective here? What are we trying to do exactly? And this is conflicting because Trump is supposed to be the peace president. No more stupid wars in the Middle East. That's what Trump ran on. So this is a betrayal to a lot of people in MAGA. Trump's approval rating continues to collapse. He's currently at 38% with basically a negative 20 net approval rating. In addition, this costs money. Weren't we supposed to avoid stupid wars in the Middle East? Because Iraq and Afghanistan added trillions and trillions to the national debt. So
why?
somebody
Just,
created the Iran cost ticker,
I just want to shoot.
and to sustain operations in Iran, this is
Only reason
costing the
to I'm
United
drunk.
States a little over $1
I'm not
billion
even drunk, I'm
a
just
day.
slightly buzzed.
So in the first 5 days of the war, it's cost the United States taxpayers $5.7 billion. What Trump is most scared about is a
Now we have
broader
this one already.
global economic catastrophe. Qatar shuts gas liquefaction, and it'll take weeks to restart the processing plant. Because the tankers can't get in or out, there's no point in processing anything, so operations are being shut down. Now, Iran has said that the Straits of Hormuz are closed. They're currently firing on and attacking any ships that try and go through the narrow strait. But I don't really think the Straits of Hormuz are closed. If Iran wanted to close them, they'd have to release sea mines. Once the sea mines are in the
Okay.
water, it's going to be a complicated process to demine the area if Iran is trying to shoot at demining ships. So I've not seen or heard any reports that mines have been released into the strait. This would close the strait to Iranian vessels as well. But it's getting crazy. This is what Donald Trump tweeted this morning about
Oh,
the
wait,
straits being
exactly.
closed. Effective immediately, I have ordered the United States Development Finance Corporation to provide at a very reasonable price political risk insurance and guarantees for the financial security of all maritime trade, especially energy, traveling through the Gulf. This will be available to all shipping lines.
Here you go, babe.
So the United States taxpayer is going to cover the damages and losses if a Kuwaiti tanker sending oil to China is damaged or sunk?
Yes.
Did Americans really vote for this in the 2024 election?
Ready to go fishing?
There is an opportunity here. Let me explain it. Defense executives plan to meet at the White House as strikes on Iran diminish stockpiles. War is expensive. We're using a lot of bombs. First, just let me say the United States is not going to run out of precision guided munitions. We have tens of thousands of SDB, small diameter bombs. You can put them on glide kits. The United States is not running out of bombs to drop on Iran, so ignore those reports. But this is significant news because the Trump administration is planning a supplemental defense budget bill to request to Congress to cover Central Command's expenses. Recall that the Biden administration did the same thing after the October 7th attack in Israel, though it was primarily additional security assistance for Israel. Getting this funding bill through Congress will be challenging unless the Trump administration follows the same playbook. and makes this an omnibus request for security assistance to Ukraine and then unfunded defense priorities. So, right now, defense contractors are meeting with the White House with a wish list, everything that they want to make or buy or whatever. But how do you get members of Congress or Democrats to vote for this? And this is a solid opportunity to say, we're not going to vote for the bill to replenish Central Command in the Middle East or help Israel unless there's also additional military aid to Ukraine. This is something that Democrats or even Republicans like Lindsey Graham could put their foot down and say, we're not going to fund your war in Iran unless you also send military aid to Ukraine. Russia and Iran are military allies, or at least they were. More Patriot missiles used in the Middle East in 3 days than in Ukraine since 2022. The Gulf states have fired off more Patriot interceptor missiles in 3 days than Ukraine has fired in 4 years in Kyiv. So, what are the numbers? And it's estimated that Iran has launched 500 ballistic missiles and 2,000 drones. But the Gulf states combined have fired about 800 of these PAC-3 Patriot interceptor missiles. Let's say that all the ballistic missiles or most of them were successfully intercepted with a Patriot missile. This means close to 300 Patriot air defense missiles have been used to shoot down $30,000, $40,000 garbage drones traveling at low speeds. This is a waste because these interceptor missiles cost millions of dollars and they're time consuming to produce, apparently. Trump administration officials acknowledged during a closed door briefing on Capitol Hill Tuesday that Iran's Shahed attack drones represent a major challenge, and U.S. air defenses will not be able to intercept them all. The drones, according to Pete Hegseth and Dan Kane, are posing a bigger problem than anticipated. We're never going to find all of these Shahed drones in Iran, and you can launch them from anywhere. You can use pickup trucks to just accelerate and then launch them into the air. So if Iran still has thousands and thousands of these Shahed drones that they haven't fired yet, there just aren't enough interceptor missiles in the Gulf to take them all down. So Ukraine is offering drone defense expertise to the Middle East after years of fighting Iranian drones in Russia's war. This is incredible, but this is a representative of the UAE saying around 40 Iranian Shaheds targeted the UAE. Ukraine, experienced in stopping them, has offered support, sharing technology that disrupts their navigation systems with up to 90% success. A million thanks to Ukraine. Wow. Here's President Zelensky. We received a request from the United States for specific support in protecting against Shaheds in the Middle Eastern region. I gave instructions to provide the necessary means and ensure the presence of Ukrainian specialists who can guarantee the required security. Ukraine helps partners who help ensure our security and protect the lives of our people. Glory to Ukraine. This is a great opportunity. I know people were kind of concerned that Trump launching a war in Iran would divert attention away from what's happening in Ukraine. But this is a way for Ukraine to stay in the headlines and to stay relevant. This is what President Zelensky said yesterday. But if we're united, it greatly strengthens our position at the negotiating table. The Middle East is calling us. Us. That's the answer. This is what our army is like, what our state is like today. We're at war, yet they're reaching out to us. Those are important signals. I believe this war in Iran, yes, there are challenges. Oil prices are rising and Russia can profit from that. But Russia has lost a great deal there. We may not fully feel it yet, but this isn't Russia's first partner. Syria, Iran, and others, none of these regimes are the first to stop seeing Russia as a strong state and a strong ally. Yeah, this war just makes Russia look incredibly weak. Russia will be next. Kremlin propagandists shocked by operations over Iran. For pro war Russians, the bombing of Iran has come as a surprise, provoking anger and fear. The Russian commentator that's been the most brutally honest, really the last couple months for some reason, is this Maxim Kalishnikov blogger. I don't know why he's not been arrested for discrediting the army, but he's being really honest. Let me read for you what he's saying today. This war in Iran, as you understand, is extremely unpleasant for the Russian Federation. Because if the Americans and the Israelis manage to knock Iran out, then China will consequently lose another resource base after Venezuela, and we lose the base for repairing our civilian airliners. Russia was using Iran to repair their civilian airliners? How does that make sense? They were serviced in Iran. Also, some weapons supplies and external trade bases for certain operations. As for the alarmist claims that this is World War III, first of all, the Third World War was the Cold War, and it ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Don't be afraid of a new world war, because who would stand up for Iran? So he's saying this is not World War III. China, as we have discussed many times with Kirill Katkov, is very sluggish like Brezhnev. There was a historically impotent team under Brezhnev, and China is roughly the same. It won't get involved in a war. Who else? The Russian Federation? It's bogged down in Ukraine. And excuse me to step in for Iran, which after all has been its partner and ally. The leadership of the Russian Federation did not dare to send troops into Ukraine in the spring of 2014. The Russian leadership did not dare to strike the decision-making center aimed at decapitation of the state, as the Americans and the Israelis are doing now. If it didn't dare to do those two things, what makes you think it would dare to go to war in Iran? Of course not, guys. What are you talking about? There will be no global hot war, I emphasize. If Iran manages to block the Straits of Hormuz for a long time, initial spikes in energy prices will occur, and then a global economic crisis will begin, followed by a decline when oil and gas prices will then crash sharply, and this will deliver a huge blow to the Russian Federation. A very unpleasant blow that will, so to speak, accelerate the very crisis born as a result of this stalemate, grinding everything down bit by bit, like a chicken pecking at the grains. The Americans showed all of our so-called multi-step strategists how war should actually be fought. This is a Russian military blogger saying, why weren't we this brutal to Ukraine, the way that the United States and Israel is acting towards Iran now? China's not going to get involved in a war, and Russia doesn't have the spare capacity to help any of their allies right now because they're bogged down in Ukraine.
One of the biggest mistakes that men over 40 make is thinking they need some complete full makeover. You don't. You just need simple, consistent upgrades like adding dose for your liver to your routine. Taking care of your body now at this age matters more than ever. And that's why I added dose for your liver to my routine. Your liver handles energy, metabolism, and how it processes food, supplements, and also daily stress. Supporting your liver is one of the smartest micro improvements that I believe you can make. The formula is clinically backed and uses quality ingredients like milk thistle, turmeric, ginger, and dandelion. And the best part is, once again, the simplicity. It's one small shot, no complicated routines, and no big giant checklist to follow.
What is going on with China? China prioritizes energy and diplomacy over Iran's support. If the government of Iran falls, China stands to lose a lot. They've made a lot of investments there. And then there's the question of energy. Here's a chart showing the flow of energy from the Straits of Hormuz. Around 25% of the world's maritime oil trades through the strait. You can see how much comes from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, UAE, Iran. And China's the biggest biter. 37% of the oil exports out of the Persian Gulf go to China. So it's China, economically, who needs the United States and Israel to win this war as fast as possible and resume normal economic activity. So the Chinese are not happy, but they're keeping their mouths shut at the moment, and they're not going to do anything. They're probably just hoping that the United States and Israel just finishes it, gets it done as fast as possible. It's crazy, guys. I'll keep you posted. Final video I have for you. Ukraine brings home 200 POWs, including Mariupol defenders who were held for 4 years in Russian captivity. This is one of these Ukrainian defenders coming home, and this is the first conversation he was able to have with his own daughter.
Ви зараз зустрінетесь в Чернігові, з вами зможе ваш тато поговорити. Все добре, він уже в Україні. Він вам зателефонує.
Я тут тоже, чуешь, дочь, я там Ванюшка. Я ела. Я тоже люблю.
Some of these guys spent almost 4 years in captivity, and they're finally free. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.
I'm going to jump into things now, and I'm as you know, often I sort of focus on one thing. There's a lot going on, so I'm going to try and answer your questions, and they will therefore mean that we have little snippets of things. So if people are coming in late, with luck, you won't feel like you missed too much, and then we will be able to wrap it all up at the end. So you asked for me to start with the arrest this morning of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And yes, that was really a surprise. If you opened up your phone in bed as I do and saw that first thing, you thought, whoa, because there is, I think, a growing sense around the globe that the Epstein files are about far more than the sexual assault of children. Although in a way that's everything, right? That is the fundamental basis on which the whole concept of exerting power over other people led for these depraved people who sexually assaulted children. But it is increasingly appearing, and by the way, I'm going to hedge this my words really carefully here, because as I've said to you before, the Epstein files are raw intelligence, so you cannot take everything that's in them at face value, but you also can't dismiss everything that's in them. And I am not in a position to be able to make good decisions about what is real in there and what is not, simply because I don't have access to the files. And as I think I've said to you before, when you look at files and when you're able to cross-check them, you can have a pretty good sense of what's viable and what's not. But I don't have that here. So I'm going to have to wait before I say anything definitive to say, you know, these things have to be vetted. Although emails that are in the files, certainly a lot of them seem to be legitimate. They're not all. apparently legitimate, but a number of them are legitimate. So I'm, like I say, I'm going to hedge what I say very carefully. But the more we learn about the politicians and the businessmen, business people, and academics around the globe, and also intelligence services that had ties to Jeffrey Epstein, the more it looks as if this is indeed a vast criminal enterprise, as a member of Congress recently described it. And as that becomes clear, that's going to cause ripples everywhere. And by ripples, I mean in governments, and I mean in financial circles, and in academic circles, and in intelligence circles, because it seems to be clear that this man and his associates, and I'm going to leave that open because in a criminal enterprise, there are almost always other people involved, were very well connected and have had an outsized influence on global affairs now for at least 20 years. And just as an example of what I'm talking about, I'm going to suggest you look, for example, at Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was instrumental in getting Trump elected in 2016. He has been all over this concept of virtual politics, in which people who were trying to sway political events in certain countries flooded the zone with disinformation. He was very much part of that. And it turns out he was a close associate of Jeffrey Epstein, and they were working together on many things. So you're going to see more and more of this. But one of the reasons, there are two reasons really, that the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was a bellwether of what might be coming. The first is that he is a senior member of the royalty, of the British royalty. And there has not been a senior member of the British royalty arrested since 1647, during the English Civil War, when people loyal to Parliament arrested the king, King Charles I. And so that right there says members, and you knew, by the way, that the UK was taking the involvement of this man in Epstein's circles very, very seriously, because among other things, last October, they stripped him of his royal titles. And, they don't strip the royals of their titles on a frequent basis by any stretch of the imagination. So you knew that they were taking it seriously. But this was, again, sort of historical, that they arrested a senior member of the royal family. Again, hadn't been done since 1647. There is also significant in that arrest the fact that they did not arrest him for the accusations that have been made against him for sexual assault. They arrested him for misusing his position in the government by allegedly, or by apparently providing non-public government information to Epstein while he was representing the UK as a trade envoy. So he's basically giving him inside information from the government. And just think of what that looks like and what that means, to have the idea that trade information that was not supposed to be public was going to Epstein. What was he doing with that? And again, one of the things to be watching with Epstein and the stuff around Epstein is that one of the currencies that group of people used was information, information that other people did not have. And they use that information to garner extraordinary wealth and power, and to exercise that power over our globe's most vulnerable people. But that exchange of information is obviously enormously valuable. And this is unlikely to be the last person who gets swept up in that kind of the repercussions of the Epstein case. But but we're not even where I am most interested in terms of the global impact yet, and that's financing. And, I did that interview the other day with Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon and talking about the fact the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, is sitting on information about how Epstein used the banking system. So his bank accounts, who's putting money into them, who's taking money out of them. And Besant is guarding that like, a dragon on his hoard of gold. So Wyden has been using every tool he can to try and shake that loose, because I think once we start getting into the finance, then it's going to be even more extraordinary. So that was the first thing that happened that I saw this morning anyway. But then the other thing that happened is that in South Korea, the former president of South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol, has been sentenced to life in prison. He's a 65-year-old man. He's been sentenced to life in prison after his attempt in December of 2024 to sort of do a self coup. He was the president, but his popularity had slipped dramatically, and he wanted to cement his power by taking over the courts and the legislature in South Korea. You may or may not remember it. It was just an absolutely fascinating night. I still remember I was I was actually in a restaurant in Washington, D.C. And when the news broke, and you might want to look at my, you can search my old letters. You might want to look back at that, because it happened quite late at night. So many people in South Korea went to bed, and then the president declared martial law, and he sent troops out to stand around the National Assembly building so that the lawmakers couldn't get inside to stop him. And there were just astonishing video of like the lawmakers climbing in windows to get in there. And they managed to vote against the imposition of martial law within a matter of, I think it was 3 hours. By the next morning, he had lifted the martial law. But what that meant is that many people in South Korea went to bed that night. This whole thing happened, and they woke up the next morning and it was over. But it happened that there was a U.S. journalist there for another reason, who happened to be where all this was taking place, and she kept a running feed of what was going on, and it was just absolutely fascinating. And again, that has played out today in that, first of all, the assembly went on and impeached Yoon, and arrested not only him but a number of people who were part of his coup, and a number of them, 5 of them now, have been sentenced to quite long prison sentences. But this morning, he was sentenced to life in prison. The prosecutors had asked for a death sentence, but they gave him life in prison because they said, well, he didn't tell the the military to kill protesters, which he could have, and so they gave him, between his age and that, they only gave him life in prison. But those two things, I think, were really interesting to start the day, because then you turn to the United States. Now, remember, in the US, theoretically, the law is king, right? Thomas Paine, we have no king. If we have to have a king, the law is king, and nobody is above the law. But the radical right, embodied as it is now by the Republican Party, has been working for a long time now to create what they call the unitary executive. And that idea of the unitary executive used to be very much a fringe theory, but the idea behind it is that because there are 3 branches of government, and they are all supposed to be independent, that nobody can check the head of the executive branch. And this really started to become more mainstream in the Republican Party during the 1980s, when members of, excuse me, Reagan's administration recognized that the American people, excuse me, that the American people did not like what the Reagan administration was doing. And so they wanted to find a way to put in place, as Reagan's Attorney General Edwin Meese said, to put in place a system whereby it didn't matter what the voters did. They were going to be able to keep Reagan's policies in place no matter what. So they start to talk about ways to make the president more powerful. And, one of the ones that is proposed actually by Samuel Alito, who was working at the time, he's now Supreme Court Justice, who was working at the time in the Department of Justice, was the idea of signing statements, for example. The idea that a president could simply say when he signed a measure that he was only going to do certain parts of it, that he was going to interpret it however he wanted. And they knew at the time that Congress would be incensed over that. So they began to work it into our system in bills that nobody paid any attention to. And it sort of sprang to everybody's attention during the George W. Bush administration when you may or may not remember, but that was shortly after Abu Ghraib, we discovered that the United States and its partners were engaging in torture. And John McCain, a Republican of Arizona, just went ballistic over that because he had been tortured during the Vietnam War. And he's like, we are not going to do this. And this is not going to happen. So Congress, in an appropriations bill, said, no torture. And George W. Bush, in a signing statement, said, I will do whatever it takes to, and this is not a direct quote, but I'm going to do whatever I think is necessary to protect the American people, essentially saying, I don't care what Congress says, I'm going to torture people or I'm going to have people tortured. That concentration of power in the president has been in defiance of what the American people want and even what Congress wants, has been growing in the Republican Party until with the court case, the Supreme Court case of Donald J. Trump versus United States of July 2024. The Supreme Court said that a president cannot be prosecuted for crimes committed as part of his official duties, and that there is in the Department of Justice an understanding. It's based on a memo, by the way. It's not a law. It's not, a court decision that a president will not be prosecuted while in office because that's a waste of their time, theoretically. Although Trump, by the way, has been thrown around lawsuits like, Pez there in the White House. So apparently he has time for his own lawsuits. He just can't answer the lawsuits. But with that decision, the Donald J. Trump versus US decision, the Supreme Court was actually, I think, doing something a little bit different than simply concentrating power on the president. They were ultimately saying that we, the Supreme Court, get to decide what is and is not a presidential duty that is okay. People kept saying, why doesn't Joe Biden just take that out for a spin? And he did, in fact, over things like the excusing of educational debt. And they said, no, you can't do that. That's not part of your official duties. So it was pretty clear that the Supreme Court was taking to itself what was a presidential duty, that it was going to be able to decide that. Nonetheless, where it has left us, and they also said then and later on in a couple of decisions that the president has to be given great leeway in terms of the way he handles foreign affairs. So Trump has been doing all kinds of wackadoodle stuff and saying, "Hey, I'm just engaging in foreign affairs. This is just national security." So where we are as of this morning is the country from which the United States of America broke in 1776 to avoid tyranny and establish the rule of law as the basis of our government is requiring less accountability from its president than the UK is demanding from a royal related to the king. And that's a real eye opener right there. We know from Jamie Raskin, a representative from Maryland, that Trump is cited in the Epstein files that have been released. Remember, no more than about 50% of them have been released, and there are rumors now that it's actually much, much lower than that. But in what's been released, he appears more than a million times. And yet, he is not answering for that. And similarly, the former president of South Korea, who did try to do exactly what Trump tried to do, or very similar to what Trump tried to do on January 6th, 2021, is now in prison for life. And similarly, of course, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil is in prison for his attempt at a coup. And the United States so far has not done anything to Donald Trump. And that's something that we are going to have to grapple with, where our failures were and why we are continuing to fail on that front. But if that's the way we started, today was also, or where we are right now, is also very odd for um, the rest of the day and what Trump has done. So, so Trump had his first meeting today of his so-called Board of Peace. Now, if you remember one of the last few days in which I talked to you, I talked about how after World War II, the US and its allies and partners embraced the idea that you could prevent a further world war by working across the globe to secure representative democracy, to have free trade or relatively free trade, and to have a number of international organizations that kind of normalized getting along with each other so that people went to each other's countries and there were students who went back and forth, and you read about each other in each other's papers, and so you created this web. Well, Trump has been actively working to destroy this, and pretty clearly his board of peace, um, is designed to replace the UN, the United Nations. He's made that very clear. So it had its first meeting today, and honestly, you could probably write an entire book around this first meeting because it was held at the U.S. Institute of Peace, which was an independent organization created by Congress in 1984. And if you remember, early on in Trump's term, people from his administration just went and seized the building and basically fired everybody who was in it. So now they have renamed it. And again, none of these renamings are official yet, and there are lawsuits over all of them. But they have renamed it the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. And this is where they held which it's quite close to the White House, by the way, in Washington, D.C. So this is where they held this Board of Peace meeting. Now, who's on this Board of Peace? If you remember, they released a document that was supposed to organize the Board of Peace, and it basically said that lots of people, lots of different countries could be part of it, but if you wanted to be a permanent member, you had to kick in $1 billion. And Trump has basically all power. He gets to say yes or no to all decisions, and he gets to expend all the money. And it honestly, to me, it looked like almost a way to make him forget about being president. So now he could really be, the grand poobah of the entire globe, and maybe they could push him out of the presidency because he's really erratic. And that showed today in a really big way. Currently, 27 countries have agreed to be part of the Board of Peace, although as far as we know, they haven't ponied up any cash, because you can come even if you don't put up the $1 billion, but you won't become a permanent member. And Trump gets to decide who represents you after you're for if you're not going to be a permanent member. So the people who have said they want to be part of this are countries who are themselves accused of human rights violations, like El Salvador, Belarus. They're those tier of countries, those people who are either rising authoritarians or they are desperate to get along with Trump because they depend on US business. They depend on having a good relationship with the US economy. So you have those 27 people. While the majority of our former friends and allies have said we're not doing this. So the list of countries that have said no, outright said no, are, well, first we got to move Canada out because Trump yanked Canada's invitation after the leader of Canada, Mark Carney, insulted his foreign policy at Davos a month or so ago. Austria, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Slovenia, Sweden, the United Kingdom, Ukraine, and the Vatican have said they will not be part of Trump's Board of Peace because they support the United Nations. They don't trust this, the way this organization is put together. And they are concerned about the fact that, who he's trying to pull together. So what happened today was, you know, through my mind are running the words bonkers and wackadoodle. But where I'm really going with this is I think we saw a demonstration of a rising dictator who has lost it. I mean, so Trump left these people waiting on stage while they were listening to his playlist of music. And then he got up and just sort of free associated and said, just watch it. I mean, he just said just crazy stuff. And then he announced that the US is putting $10 billion into the border peace. Well, he has no authority to do that. Congress is the only body of our government that can appropriate money. And here's a news flash: the revenue measures all have to start in the House of Representatives. So that's something people tend to forget. And someday maybe I'll give you a whole thing on taxes, because the way that the government is set up to handle revenue measures is actually really quite interesting. But he just sort of said, we're going to do this. And it was, in my notes, because I was writing about this today, in my notes, what I really wrote was the Trump show. That's what it felt like. It was just the Trump show. Um, at the same time, there was something else that came in the news today that you probably didn't see. It was an exclusive out of the Washington Post, including from a man who has just left the Washington Post, a great journalist, Jacob Bogage, in which they identified, these two journalists, Bogage and Lena's son, identified that the White House, along with the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the one run by Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who
For $10 more.
has also looked quite erratic lately,
What?
is proposing, and I'm sorry, I know I sound incredulous, but I really am incredulous, is proposing a new organization for the United States that essentially replicates the World Health Organization.
Straight
The
even.
World Health Organization that we just pulled out of because Trump's, had all these political reasons he was mad at it. He didn't like the way they handled
Whenever they
COVID-19 and
drop
so on.
get one
But
away.
they're talking about recreating a version of the WHO under Robert Kennedy that is US based and that will cost us $2 billion annually, compared to the money that we used to put in the WHO, the World Health Organization, which was 680 million. And experts are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, we got so much bang for our buck at $680 million that you're now asking us to recreate this for $2 billion a year, and it's not going to be nearly as good. And again, I think what you're seeing here, I'm trying to look at the big picture here. I think what you're seeing here is this idea of America first is really Trump first, Trump's people first. He wants to get rid of the trade and the international organizations that actually make people's lives better and are less expensive than trying to go it alone. Because if you bring it home and you put up walls, then it's possible to get rid of oversight and to put a lot of that money in your own pocket, is my guess. Is what's really going on here. Paul Krugman had a great segment on Kennedy and the extraordinary value in not value, the extraordinary grift in the alternative treatments that people like Kennedy support. That's not really my lane, but there's just no other reason that you can look at getting rid of the UN and getting rid of the WHO and then saying, oh, we're just going to recreate them here in the US. Give me billions of dollars, without seeing that this is, yet another way to fleece the people in the United States of America. On that front, I'm going to jump a little bit here because I'm not quite done with Trump. But I do want to call your attention to an interview that I did this morning with Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota, because there's something else happening right now that has really flown under the radar screen. And I'm not going to write about it in my letters tonight, but I am going to write about it before the weekend, probably tomorrow night, unless something dire happens between now and then, if not then Saturday night. And that is that the Republicans under Donald Trump are
I don't know.
trying to use a law in the US to just basically turn over our wilderness lands
Come on,
to
man. I don't know,
developers,
baby.
miners, real estate development, and so on. And that is the issue. The reason it's in the news right now, and you may not be seeing it, is seeing it because there's so much else going on. I think what you're seeing right now is Trump really hammering Minnesota, really trying to hurt Minnesota, because Minnesota is a Democratic state in the midst of a whole bunch of Republican states. And he keeps insisting he won it 3 times. He did not. He lost it by a lot 3 times. And it has a very high rate of voting as well. And he's trying to get the voting records and all that. But the Boundary Waters canoe area, which sounds less impressive than that actual extraordinary protected land is, currently is protected from mining. And there has been an attempt for years now for a Chilean company to come in and mine at the headwaters of the Boundary Waters canoe area, which also includes Canada, by the way, although it has a different name there. And Congress under Trump, and of course, Congress in both chambers is controlled by Republicans, is trying to use something called the Congressional Review Act to strip away the regulations over public lands going way back. Now, in the past, the Congressional Review Act was designed only to enable Congress to look back for about 60 days. So if the president put a new kind of regulation on something, the Congress had about 2 months to say, nah, we don't want to do that. But this Congress is using it to go way back, to go back many years, and they are expanding it beyond regulations into other kinds of orders as well. And the trick to this is that because of the way the CRA, as it's known, is written, a simple majority vote in both chambers makes that regulation moot. So they're trying to do that. It's already the CRA for the Boundary Waters has already passed the House of Representatives, and it's supposed to come up before the Senate next week. I thought there was actually a date scheduled. The senator says she doesn't think there is, but and she would know. But this is very serious, because if they do this through the CRA to the Boundary Waters canoe area, they can go after any of the public lands in any state. And they've been very clear. The Trump administration has been very clear that they intend to do this. And while this is an issue for conservation because of pollution, of course, especially for the Boundary Waters, one of the things that really jumps out to me is that outdoor recreation is an enormously big business in the United States, but it's mom and pop organizations. You know, the people who run the hunting trips, and the people who run the canoeing trips, and the backpacking trips, and the restaurants that support those people, and the small stores, and all of those things really help to reinforce democracy, because it's a much, it's people have enough to eat, and they are independent thinkers, and small businesses are actually what drive this country, not the big ones we pay so much attention to. And if you turn over our wilderness areas to these giant corporations, a very, very few people get extraordinarily wealthy. And we lose access to those wilderness areas. And that's hiking, and that's camping, and that's fishing, and that's hunting, and that's photography, and that's, all the things that you do in those wilderness areas. But you're also going to lose all those businesses. So if you think, for example, if you live near a resort area, and I always think of, if you're outside of Zion National Park, um, people go out there for the national park, and you all should. It's a spectacular national park. But if you take away that national park, those towns are going to die. I mean, it's not a place that you would end up otherwise. So that is true across this country for wilderness areas. And I really want to call that out because I feel like people don't know it's happening. And please do, if you're interested in this. I'm thrilled to say that I've been able to do these interviews with a lot of people, and I would like to do more, but of course I'm pretty busy writing the letters and all that. But they've been really spectacular because I do insist on prepping ahead of them, both for them and for me. And they come prepared really to explain to you what they care about and why and what you can do about it. And Senator Smith was no exception. She was really terrific on this. And I made her promise to come back because the reason that I reached out to her is I wanted to talk about agriculture, which is something else we're not talking about. And she's on the Agriculture Committee in the Senate. And if you ever want to play Richardson trivia, I have admitted this before to my friend Joanne Freeman. My favorite committee in Congress is the Agriculture Committee. And nobody pays any attention to it, but it's actually really cool, as are the ag journals. So she's going to come back and talk about that. But please do look at that. So let me go back to the other material. If that was this morning with Trump on the Board of Peace, where he fell asleep, by the way, and this weird thing with the WHO, that's not all that Trump did today. It is alarming that he has caused a giant, weirdly, I just picked up the language there of the Declaration of Independence. I did not intend to do that. But he has caused to have erected on the Department of Justice his own portrait, a giant portrait of himself. Now, he tested that out earlier this year on the US Department of Agriculture. It didn't get a lot of attention, but he put a giant picture of himself up there. I think he also showed up on another building as well. It might have been Commerce. I could be wrong about that, but he was on USDA. Now he has put his own image on the Department of Justice, pretty clearly announcing to us all that he is in charge of the laws in this country from now on. This is 100% dictator material. And he also today put two new people on the Fine Arts Commission that was supposed to be in charge of, not be in charge, one of the organizations in charge of approving his grand ballroom now, which completely dwarfs the original White House. Two new people went on this morning, including his 26-year-old former executive assistant. I'm not former, executive assistant who does not have any experience in fine arts. And they are now, everybody on that commission, a Trump appointee, and they approved his plans for the ballroom. Now, that is in a lawsuit, and there is also somebody else who has to sign off on it. But there too, what you're essentially seeing, I think, is a president who is obviously making dictatorial moves, but is also completely out of touch with reality. The guy has lost it. And we're watching this. I'm sitting here watching this and being like, I can't believe that the Republicans are sitting and letting this happen. That being said, another thing, and the reason I started late today, although obviously I screwed up so much of the technology, it went even later. There is a buildup of US forces around Iran, quite serious forces. Now, if you remember, Trump insists that he got rid of Iran's capability for enriching uranium back when he hit those underground facilities with the bunker buster bombs there. But now, of course, he insists that they have to stop the program that he says he already stopped. We don't know what he's going to do with regard to Iran, but there was just as of this afternoon late story out of the Wall Street Journal that he is thinking about a limited strike to force Iran to stop its enrichment, which is, of course, ongoing. And if they refuse, then he will go after Iran fully. Now, there's a lot of things wrong with this. One of the things that is hugely problematic is Trump is making these decisions without Congress, and Trump is bonkers. And in addition to those things, and those right there are non-starters, I would like to point out to you that something that is increasingly concerning to me, and that is that he's just putting all this on our tab. the tax cuts that he's given to the wealthy and corporations are sending our deficits and therefore our debt. Remember, deficit is the difference in what we take in and put out in a year, and the debt is the accumulation of those deficits. These things are going through the roof. We are spending money like nobody's business, and we're not getting anything for it. That is, when Biden and even Trump during COVID was putting, things on our tab, we were getting education or new roads or new hospitals, or we were investing in the U.S. This is simply we're having things go bang to make Trump feel good, and I am really concerned about that and about the what that's doing to our finances, which I've written about quite recently. They're problematic to the point that the Wall Street Journal is talking about higher taxes. And by the way, just so you know, the U.S. has the money to take care of all these things, but the way our tax structure has been since the first set of the George W. Bush tax cuts, we have moved from being in the black to being deeply in the red. We could fix that, but there has to be political will to do it. So this is what we're watching right now. And we're also watching all of this taking place as Trump is increasingly under pressure from the Epstein files. As you know, the New Mexico has put together a commission now and is now reopening an investigation of Epstein's Zorro Ranch. So he's under pressure there. He came out this afternoon and said that it was a real shame that they had arrested the guy in the UK, but he Donald Trump had been exonerated, which is just, I mean, that's child thinking. I didn't take that cookie. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And now we all know I didn't do it. When you're sitting there covered with crumbs, right? Um, he's got that pressing down. He's got the extraordinary unpopularity of the federal agents from ICE and Border Patrol. That is causing his popularity to plummet to the point that, of course, they have said they're pulling troops out of Minnesota. And in fact, it appears what they have, not troops, I'm sorry, federal agents out of Minnesota. And what it appears that they have done is not actually pulling people out of cities, or rather pulling people out of cities, but putting them into the suburbs and in more rural areas. So you're seeing more rural arrests everywhere, including close by me here in Maine. So I think they're trying to make it look like they're not doing what they are continuing to do. People are really unhappy about that, and at the same time, you've got this this midterm election coming up. So today has been just this really weird day where you're watching other countries deal with an unstable leader or a leader implicated in crimes, while we, on the other hand, are watching our president kind of go rogue and you know be behaving in such a way that the history books will call out today as a day that really stands out. And then this afternoon, he went to Georgia for what was supposed to be a speech on the economy, and that went just as well as you can imagine. So it's been an odd day. And I think that I got to almost everything that you asked about. I was trying, it's kind of a game for me to see if I can put it into a story, the questions that you ask. But let me end with yet one more question. Somebody asked if resistance to Adolf Hitler looked like resistance to Trump. And I am an Americanist for the millionth time. I do know about some of the facts around Hitler and other people as well. But I am trained as an Americanist. And what that means is that while I know historical theories, general historical theories, literally my doctorate, my master's degree, and my undergraduate degree, that's actually in history, but they're in my master's is in literature and art in the United States of America. Like, you take me to Italy, I'm lost unless I read a book. But by God, I can do American stuff. History, same thing. I know American history really, really well. But off this continent, I'm flying, like everybody else is. That being said, if you look at Hitler's rise, there are many parallels there to what I see in the rise in the late 19th century of the reactionary movement in the American South. And in both of them, I think, but my ground is much more secure in the American South. No, there was a majority of people who did not like what was happening because it's not just about race in the South. It's also about it's about class and it's about who's getting all the money. But what they didn't have in the South, and also I believe in Germany, but I'm outside my ken there, is the ability to communicate with each other and to say, "Hey, we got trouble over here. Please come help me," and to be able to say, "Hey, we're all in this together." In the American South after the Civil War, the newspapers and the means of communication were overwhelmingly controlled by former Confederates. So the stories that came out, the information that came out was all incredibly skewed. You know, there would be a riot where a whole bunch of white guys would kill a whole bunch of black guys, and it would show up in the paper as Black People Riot, you know? And when the KKK visited people, they did it in the dead of night, and nobody had a telephone. We don't get telephones in the White House until 1876. So, and it certainly wasn't going to be in the American South. I mean, when I was growing up, we didn't have phones around here, you know? So in the 1960s, not everybody had that. So we have now this ability to create pushback that in that era, individuals did not have, small groups did not have. And that really matters, especially in a country this big, because as people communicate about things like the Congressional Review Act, or that ICE is showing up in, you know, a small town in Maine, or any of the kind of things that normally would have flown under the radar screen, we get to hear about. And that really, really matters. So in this moment, again, speaking up is huge. And speaking up again, the senator today said, please do call every senator. And it was really interesting because I asked which one specifically, and she said, we're not allowed to tell you to call other senators, but think about who might be interested. And I'm thinking, okay, what she's basically saying to us is call any senator who's vulnerable, right? Susan Collins in Maine, light up her phones, right? And anybody who's trying to get reelected in 26 in the Senate, um, is vulnerable on this particular issue because we know Americans don't want to turn over our lands to a few international companies, right? This is a Chilean mine for the Boundary Waters, mining companies. So speaking up definitely matters. And showing up for your neighbors. I said that thing about the torches yesterday or Tuesday, and I still love that. I think that's really important. But I also really want to call your attention to what's happening and what the trend seems to be in the United States. So, okay, so you got the
You need two more beer?
halftime show, the Bad Bunny halftime show, and people reacting to that.
It
You've got
is my
James
day.
Tallarico,
Can you
getting such
hear?
incredible publicity
Today's
for
my
hopping
day.
on Colbert when the
Monday.
FCC tried to make that not be aired. And I do want to do a little bit of a shout out there. I am a huge supporter of Tallarico. You know, I had him early on in interviews and so on. But it does seem to me unfair that he's getting the kind of publicity he is getting because of this when Jasmine Crockett is also a terrific candidate. They're just very different. We need them both in our system, but they can't both be senators, the same senator from Texas. So if you're from Texas, you make your own decision. Don't let Brendan Carr or Stephen Colbert make that decision. They're both very strong candidates in very different ways. And those of us who don't live in Texas, you know, I just feel like you should stay out of, personally, I think you should stay out of elections that aren't your state. That's me. But you're seeing this change. But have you looked at the fact that after Bruce Springsteen released that song, whatever, I don't remember the name of it, for Minneapolis, now he has announced he's doing a tour. He's going to be doing an anti-ice tour. Springsteen has gone back on the road to do this. And today, U2 released a song. And that change in popular culture reflects um, reflects a movement. It doesn't just reflect people trying to make money or whatever. I promise you, Springsteen and U2 don't need any more money. It is showing a movement. These guys don't need to come out of retirement, and they haven't come out of retirement for other stuff, but they are getting on board a movement to defend American democracy. And I do want just to call out the
You can give me a
fact
beer?
that you know who started that? You did. I absolutely love
No beer?
this. This is a
Why not?
popular movement. This is a grassroots movement. This is, you know, Alex Preddy and Renee Good, but it's also all those people who showed up in their incredible, on those incredibly cold days in Minneapolis, and who, you know, are buying out restaurants so that workers don't have to be unsafe around federal agents. This is truly an American movement. And I got to tell you, you know, when I start, you know, when I watched the rise, not just of Trump, I mean, it was back George W. Bush, I was like, oh crap, we're in trouble. It really felt like people like me were, you know, crying in the wilderness, right? And and I think probably it felt that way to a lot of you too when I said things like, you know, go arrange flowers or go stand on a bridge. Um, but all those little things have added up and they've made a difference and they are continuing to make a difference and more people are getting involved. And if you need to take a break, by God, do it, you know, because we'll be here and other people will be here too, helping to move the cause forward. But as I tell you to call and to pick up your torch and to do all of those things, you know, do kind of take a deep breath and realize that when you have people like Senator John Ossoff of Georgia giving that amazing speech last week that I haven't written about yet, but I will, or um, Governor J.B. Pritzker of Chicago talking about principles and love and building a system that gives us better housing and education and health care. Um, that you did that. That's because these elected people are listening to you, and the musicians who are supporting this cause are listening to you, and the artists who are making great art, and the people who are paying for billboards to put Epstein files with Donald Trump's face on it, they're listening to you. And that, on the days when you have a hard time getting up and picking up your torch again, maybe that'll help. So thank you for everything you're doing, and I'll keep doing my part. Thank you for being here and keep the faith. We have lost our Facebook connection right off the bat like that, and there's nothing that I am able to do to replace it. So we'll just have to put it live up there later. Hey, everybody. For coming to us from Lynchburg, Virginia, and Estes Park, Colorado, Indiana, South Dakota, St. Louis, Missouri, Woodstock, Georgia, Washington State. Always fun to see if we can go a long time without duplicating. But there we go. We got another Indiana, but then right behind it is Austria. Welcome, everybody. I'm so pleased, first of all, that you're here. And second of all, that after Dr. Tim Snyder and I have tried now for months to get together to talk on, you know, over the internet, and we just haven't been able to manage it. And we finally have done so. So Tim is joining us from the University of Toronto, and I'm just so pleased finally to get a chance to do this.
Yeah, me too. This is a kind of where you've been all my life type situation, and I'm really glad that there's now an answer to that question, and we're right here together. So looking forward to talking.
Exactly. Well, so you are best known, of course, for all your work on authoritarianism and totalitarianism and on war, which I hope we will get to. But one of the things that has distressed me a little bit in the last several months is how much more rarely you see discussions of your recent book on freedom, which I thought was an incredibly important book. And I would love it if you would walk walk us through what you were doing in that book and what argument you were trying to make in it? Because I think it's one that people need to hear nowadays.
Yeah. Well, first of all, any good politics has to be a politics of the future. So we're stuck now in a present where we seem to be locked together in silly conversations on social media, or polarized, or stuck in some way or another. And we also are facing politicians like Trump and Putin who keep us in a kind of artificial nostalgia, who are propelling us back into things that never happened, into way things never were. And to break through that, I think we need to have the future. And the future has to have a big idea. And so I was thinking about what's the big idea, what's the right idea, and how to get it right. And I think the answer is freedom, not just tactically because it comes from American traditions and it's a word that we are familiar with, but more politically or even spiritually, that this is the value of values, that the point of freedom is that it's the condition in which we can become who we want to be. Freedom is the value of values in the sense that it creates the space and the opportunity for us to bring other values into the world. The argument of the book is that freedom is not negative but positive. As Americans, we tend to think that freedom is just freedom from, but freedom from isn't enough, even in the most desperate situations. I was thinking a lot about this on the front or in deoccupied zones in Ukraine, where even if you have regained control of a village, people aren't really free unless they have water, unless they have food, unless they have a road, unless they have healthcare. And the same was true at the end of the Second War. Concentration camps, as doctors and nurses said, weren't really liberated. People needed care. And if you think about this broadly, this is true of all of us all the time. To be free, the right conditions have to be created around us so we can become the kind of people who can be free. So freedom has to be done together. It's positive in that it takes cooperative political effort, but it's also positive in the sense that it's not about someone restraining you from doing something. It's about what you would do if you weren't restrained. It's about the things you actually care for. So in practice, being free can't just be a matter of carping and complaining and pounding against the wall. It also has to be a matter of imagining, creating, sharing, thinking your way through to a future which will be different for you and for other people.
Well, so what I really thought was very compelling about that argument is not only the principles behind it, with which I agree, but also it's a really important pushback against the concept of freedom that the radical right has been embracing in the United States now since at least the 1980s. The idea that American freedom is about stopping the government, keeping the government away from you, and turning it instead to the idea that the government, as it represents the American people, has a role to play in guaranteeing that freedom through things like clean water, opportunities for education, infrastructure, and so on. Do you want to play that one out a little bit?
Yeah, that's such an excellent American point, and it's completely right. That argument is a trap. So if you think that freedom is just freedom from, if you think it's just negative freedom, then it's very easy to persuade you that the problem is the government, like you say. And that is just what has happened in the US in the last half century. But if I persuade you that the problem is the government, then you can think, well, I'll be more free if there's less government. And what that does is it gives a license to oligarchs essentially to break the government. And that's not some kind of fantastic scenario. That is the second Trump administration, oligarchs breaking the government. So when you make government smaller, you're not making normal people more free. What you're doing is you're replacing the government with something worse, which is oligarchical rule. Power doesn't go away. Instead, it ends up in the wrong hands. That's what we're seeing. On the positive side, though, if we think about freedom as the task of government, we find ourselves in a much warmer and a much more prosperous place. If we define the job of government as creating the conditions for making us free, then it's completely justified to do the sorts of things you're talking about, to care about clean water and clean air. If you don't have those things, you're not free. To care about the quality of your food. If you don't have that, you're not free. To be concerned about public education. If your child can't move through a system of public education and have access to healthcare, that child is not going to grow up free. And so you can actually generate a program for a very appealing and successful kind of government by asking, okay, are these the structures that help us to become free?
So I love that because you know who made that argument first in the United States at the national level was Theodore Roosevelt.
Hmm.
And of course, today, as you and I are recording this, this is March 25th. This is the anniversary of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in New York City, which
Mhm.
hit home for a number of people that the government must get involved in things like workplace protections and better conditions for workers and an end to child labor and so on in order to create freedom, in order to support individualism, which again, at the time, the argument had been the opposite, that you wanted to have a small government that stayed out of the lives of business people and interfered with the way they did their work, and instead said, no, 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 in order to have true individualism and freedom, you must have the government intervene in workplace situations, for example. And it just feels lovely to be talking about that today.
Yeah, this